Okay, so yesterday we began to analyze the general celebration of the Seder. How there are two components to the celebration of the Seder. There is the commemoration of what happened to us in Egypt verbally, and there are the actions that we do to celebrate um, and commemorate what happened to us in Egypt. And we drew a parallel between them. We said that just like in regards to the commemoration of the Exodus, we begin with the commemoration of the slavery. In a similar way, there are various actions that we do that commemorate the slavery in order to highlight the grandeur of the redemption. In other words, the contrast that we experience today in our being free from Egypt versus where we were before, that contrast highlights and accentuates the sense of freedom on night of the Seder. So that's why, in addition to having the mitzvah of eating matzah, which commemorates the redemption, there's also a concept of eating maror, commemorate the hardship of the exile. Then there was a question about whether maror nowadays is a biblical commandment. And what we learned was that everyone agrees it's not a biblical commandment. And why not? Because the sensing the slavery at nowadays, sensing the how hard the slavery was, although it's meant to highlight the greatness of the redemption by then eating the matzah, but because we're not living in the state that we were when we had King Solomon and the temple was built, and we had more or less a sense of absolute freedom from in a far greater way than we do today. Since we don't have that yet, so the question is: does commemorating the slavery accentuate the redemption? Does it highlight the redemption, or does it tint the story of the redemption with a more sombering reality that we're still in exile? That's not the purpose of eating the maror. And therefore, the halacha is that nowadays there's no biblical commandment to eat maror because the maror today can tint the sense of freedom and redemption. We do it, but it doesn't have the gravity of the importance of being the maror isn't the same. And then we started discussing the charoses. And we learned that the charoses commemorates the slavery in Egypt, how we had to create mortar for the bricks that we built in Egypt. And we learned that there's an argument between Maimonides and the Ravid about whether or not the matzah should be dipped into the charoses. They both agreed that in Taina Beis Hamikdash, the matzah should be dipped into charoses. The question is only if this should be done today as well. The Rama maintains that it should be, and the Ravid maintains that it shouldn't. So the opinion of the Ravid seems to flow well with what we learned. If charoses is about the exile, about the creating the bricks for the Egyptians, so it makes sense that we wouldn't want to put that together with the matzah and accentuate the redemption, because it may do the opposite. It may bring out the sense of slavery and thus take away from the sense of freedom, because we don't have a full freedom today until Mashiach comes. Therefore, the question is, why does Maimonides maintain the opposite? Why does he say that, yes, we should dip the matzah into the charoses? We should connect the exile with the redemption. We should put the redemption on the pedestal of the exile by dipping the matzah into the charoses. Why does Maimonides say we should do that when he does agree that we don't eat, that the obligation of eating maror nowadays is not a biblical one? Because eating maror does take away from the sense of redemption. How come Maimonides makes a distinction between the commemoration of the exile through eating the maror and the commemoration of the exile through the charosas? And why is one considered a positive thing, and one um, not considered a positive one? The maror is not considered a biblical commandment nowadays, but the charosas is considered important in order to say the story of the redemption. Talk about the mortar. Dip the matzah into the charosas. So I talk about the charosas, dip the matzah in the charosas to highlight that we came from charosas, we came from mortar, and now we're free. Why is there a distinction between them? Don't the charosas and the mar equally convey to us the difficulty of the exile? And therefore, both of them should either be relevant and accentuate how we've gone from slavery to freedom, or both be difficult to do today because they also remind us that we're still in exile today. Why is there a distinction according to Maimonides? That the maror nowadays is not a biblical commandment, but the charosas is important for the matzah. To sense what the matzah is, you have to dip it into charosas. To sense the redemption of the matzah, you have to dip the matzah into charosas. That's what we left the question with yesterday. So to understand this, let's begin with this. On the night of the Seder, we begin by saying, this is the bread of affliction that our forefathers ate in Egypt. Now we are slaves. Next year we'll be free. Now we are outside of Israel. Next year we'll be in Israel. Next year we'll be free in Israel. Next year Mashiach will come. Now we're slaves. Next year we'll be free and Eretz Yisrael. Mashiach will have long been here. So the question is, if we are slaves, as we say explicitly at the Haggadah, then why are we celebrating? If we're still in exile, then why are we celebrating? So the Maharal explains this. Maharal says that the difficulty of the slavery in Egypt was unique. And all of the kinds of slavery that the Jewish people have experienced and hardship that they've experienced since the exodus from Egypt is different. It's not the same category as being a slave to the Pharaoh. Because at the time that God took us out of Egypt, the Jewish people remained freed from the exile to Egypt forever. And all of the exiles subsequent to Egypt do not reach the severity of the slavery in Egypt. The slavery in Egypt was unique, and because we have not only been free, but we remain free from Egypt, it's something that Hashem did to us, and He defined us as free people. We are not we're not only happen to be freed, we are essentially free people. We're not just a circumstance that we are freed, but we are no longer able to be in the same kind of slavery that we were in Egypt, because God gave us a status of freedom. God, who is the master of the world, He didn't just give us a circumstance of freedom. He freed us forever from the unique slavery of Egypt. The unique slavery in Egypt wasn't only in the difficulty in the slavery in the body. The main problem in Egypt, not just this was also a problem, the main problem was the spiritual slavery. Jewish people were subservient to the evil of Egypt, to the extent Torah says that we were submerged in 49 gates of impurity. So the Maharal says, the Shalah says on the verse, and they did bad to us, which is usually translated as the Egyptians did bad to us. He points out that the literal translation of it is, and they made us bad. Or as the angel said when we were crossing the Red Sea and when God was about to split the Red Sea, the angel said to God, they're idol worshippers, they're both idol worshippers. Why are you saving the Jews and destroying the Egyptians? They're the same, they're both idol worshippers. There's no reason that we should be considered superior to them in any way. We're the same. So the difficulty wasn't just a physical one, it was a spiritual one. We were in the 49th gate of impurity, and it said that in the Talmud that if we would have been there for another minute, it would have been irretrievable. We were so low. spiritual. And the reason why the slavery in Egypt was worse spiritually than any other exile is because the evil in Egypt was worse than all the other exiles. As the Talmud says, that the Egyptians were worse than all other nations, because the evil in Egypt wasn't just a detail of some kind of aspect of evil. Rather, the evil in Egypt was the general. It wasn't a detail of evil. It was the general. It was the essence of evil, and the source of all kinds of evil, including the evil of the other exiles. All the exiles are sourced in Egypt. Egypt is the essence of evil and the source of evil. It's a general point. It's the common denominator of evil. It's the core of where all evil emerges from. And that's the reason why the Talmud says that all other nations to whom we were enslaved to are also called Egypt. Why is it Talmud? Because the word Egypt means to cause pain. They're called Egypt because Metzirin Yisrael, because they give pain to the Jewish people. So on the surface, the Talmud is saying some kind of a superficial thing. Egypt means to cause pain. All other exiles, the nations, cause us pain, but it's deeper. The reason why Egypt is the source of all exiles is because the evil in Egypt is the source of all the evil, of the details of evil that were conferred upon us, that we were subjugated to in all the subsequent exiles. And that's why they have the same name. The reason all the exiles have the same name is because they have the same content. They're all from the same stuff. Egypt is a source of evil, and all different kinds of evil that emerge through the various exiles. In the story of Hanukkah, the story of Purim, and the story of the exile today, it's all called by the name Egypt because it all comes from the same place. It all comes from the evil in Egypt. So what comes out of this is that the difficulty in the slavery in Egypt is worse than all the subsequent exiles, both in the physical sense, it was a harder slavery. We were truly slaves, and also in a spiritual sense, that the evil that we were subjugated to was a very difficult, worser kind of evil, the general source of evil, and this is worse than all the other evil in the other nations that we were subjugated to, because the evil in Egypt was a source of all that. So now we can understand why we're able to celebrate the Exodus, even though we haven't yet experienced full freedom. Because although we're under the servitude of nations, nevertheless, unlike when Mashiach will come, that we won't be subjugated to the rule of any other nation. So although there is this concept of servitude, nevertheless, from the moment the Jewish people were freed from Egypt, they were freed from the difficult, both embodying both the physical and spiritual difficulty in the slavery in Egypt. So all the difficulties, all the physical and spiritual difficulties that have emerged throughout the exile do not reach the physical and spiritual difficulty that we had in Egypt, and therefore we could celebrate. Okay, so we learned that there are two things that we do to commemorate the exile: eating the maror and the charoses. The maror and the charoses aren't the same in the commemoration of the exile. Each of them reminds us of another aspect of the slavery. The commemoration of the slavery in the eating the maror is a commemoration to us being slaves in Egypt. Every kind of slavery has maror, has bitterness. It's bitter to be a slave. I remember visiting Jews in jail and thinking, like, some jails have very good conditions, but there's such a bitterness in the very sense that you are a slave. You have no control of yourself. So maror represents the bitterness of slavery in general. On the other hand, the charoses, it's not a commemoration to slavery in general. The charoses is a commemoration to the exile in Egypt. It's commemoration to the mortar that we created to make the bricks in Egypt. So it comes out that charoses is a commemoration to the unique problem of Egypt. And the murder is a commemoration to the general concept of slavery. So before we began with this argument between Maimonides and Ravid about whether or not nowadays we should dip the matzah into the charoses. And we said that the Ravid says do not dip the matzah in the charoses, and the Maimonides, the Rambam says you should dip the matzah in the charoses. What's the meaning of the Rambam's opinion? That's the question. According to the Rambam, charoses is a commemoration for the slavery, and you agree that murder nowadays is not a biblical commandment, and that because it doesn't only bring out the contrast of where we are today to where we were before, it doesn't only suggest that now we're in a much better place. Even the murder, we said, also brings a tinge of the stark reality that Mashiach hasn't yet come, and therefore it seems to be inappropriate when we're trying to reach a state of experiencing redemption. So if Maimonides agrees that we shouldn't, that the murder we eat nowadays doesn't have that weight, then why does Maimonides maintain that we should dip the matzah into the charoses? The answer is this. There's a difference between them. Now we understand the difference. There's a difference between the murder and the charoses. The murder, it is commemoration for slavery in general. And since it's a commemoration for slavery in general, therefore, having any murder nowadays, according to the Rambam, is going to take away from the sense of celebration and freedom. Why? Because we don't have the full freedom until Mashiach comes. So therefore, murder is not something that is fully positive. It could tint the sense of celebration with a sobering sense of, no, Mashiach hasn't come, because murder is about slavery in general, and we have that. However, says the Rambam, the charoses is different. The charoses is not about the commemoration of slavery in general. The charoses is about the unique problem in Egypt, and that we're relieved from. And therefore, we could dip the matzah in the charoses, because the charoses is not a commemoration to the general idea of slavery, it's commemoration to the unique problem that we had in Egypt. And we're relieved of that problem. Therefore, you can dip the matzah in the charoses, which represents that you could experience how amazing it is that we were taken out of Egypt by thinking about the unique problem of Egypt. Think of the unique problem we had in Egypt. That is something we can celebrate because we were relieved from that problem. So although even if you delve into, you dip into the charoses, you dip into that problem, you think about it, that will only highlight, make you feel gratitude for the redemption. Like we discussed yesterday about this wealthy man who had this room where he kept his old tattered clothing, where he kept his old mattress that he used to sleep in the streets with. He kept it to highlight how he felt free now that he's relieved of that issue. That's why we could dip the matzah in the charoses. We can experience the contrast of where we were before where we are now. However, the Ravid maintains that it doesn't work that way. The Ravid maintains, yes, indeed, we were freed from the unique slavery in Egypt. However, since slavery is slavery, and we haven't been fully freed from slavery, so although we were relieved from Egypt, but putting the matzah in the charoses, says the Ravid, isn't a good idea. It's going to give the wrong message of what we're trying to do tonight. The Ravid says you can't have half a redemption. You can't be halfway. So if you're going to focus on the slavery, the difficult slavery in Egypt, you're also going to bring to the fore in your consciousness how we still have some of that. You're not going to be able to fully really experience redemption if you delve into the unique slavery that we had in Egypt. Yes, we were relieved from that, but we still have some kind of slavery. It's a different kind of slavery, albeit, but it's still slavery. And since we are experiencing some kind of slavery, therefore the Ravid says, don't focus on the unique slavery in Egypt. Don't dip your matzah into the charosis. It's not going to contrast where you were before to where you are now. Instead, it's going to somber this sense of freedom and redemption, which is not the way it's supposed to be. It's supposed to be a full sense of freedom and redemption. So that's the reason why Maimonides and the Rav differ about whether we should do matzah and charesis. Again, according to the Maimonides, we do the matzah and charesis because the charesis represents the unique problem in Egypt which we were relieved from, and therefore we should highlight how we've gone from that unique problem to where we are today, versus the Ravid, who says that any trace of slavery still is connected to the unique slavery of Egypt. Since today we have something like that today, we still have some Egypt-like reality today. Therefore, the Ravid says putting the matzah and the charesis is insulting, is taking away from, it's weakening this sense of redemption. B'rut Hashem, tomorrow we'll discuss, God willing, more details, God willing, about the laws of charesis, the element of putting the charesis on the table versus dipping the mutter and the matzah and charesis. Have a great day, Chaim Peretz.